Well. Happy Marvelous Monday, everybody. I hope that you are well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am super excited to share a much needed topic and conversation. I hope that you had an opportunity to check out the description. So, today we are talking about a $100,000 costly mistake. Yep, I said it right. $100,000 is what one landlord in particular had to pay. And so I'm going to share a few case studies. It's all around the center topic of mold. All right. So I know that some of you are very familiar with mold and what it does and how it impacts not just a rental property, but also the health of people. Right. And so I'm going to touch on that today. But before I do, again, welcome. I am Karissa Spann. I am your host. This is what I do each and every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I share information to help landlords and tenants, hopefully to positively impact the entire rental community. I do hope that something I share today you find of value. So whether you or someone you know is a landlord or a tenant, I welcome the feedback. If you have questions, comments, remarks, or observations, throw it in the comment section. Let me know where you're tuned in from. I would love to know if you're watching on Facebook, on YouTube, or LinkedIn because I'm live on all platforms. So, again, thank you so much. I promise that the information that I share today is not legal advice. I do have to say that. I am, however, sharing the industry's best tips and practices. And so today I want to dive deep into this conversation and discussion because, I just simply believe that if some people really took their job, their roles, and their responsibilities seriously, it could potentially avoid a lot of costly mistakes like the one that I'm going to talk about today. And so today I'm going to share three case studies, but one in particular, this landlord over $100,000. That's a costly mistake. I don't know about you, but I don't want to make that kind of mistake where it's costing me out of my pocket $100,000 because of something that I have not done. And so before I get into the discussion and the comments that are going to come in, I just want to say I will respond to everybody. If you just put in the comment section, I'll respond to you today. I do want to acknowledge some people who are here. I see that I have some viewers who are tuned in South Carolina. Thank you so much. And again, I just want to welcome you to this thought-provoking and this eye-opening discussion because it's so needed. I'm going to ask that if you are new, if you wouldn't mind, let me know in the comment section what jurisdiction you're watching from. I do have viewers who are on the East Coast. I have viewers who are tuned in from the Midwest. So let me know where you're tuned in from because I would love to know where my new viewers are tuned in from. And so today, again, I have one mission, and that's to share information and to make sure that it's clear and it's understandable. So if at any time you have a question, you have a comment, please feel free to just throw it in the comment section. I will slow down to answer questions that you all may have today. If you're watching a replay, thank you so much. And again, we are talking about the costly mistake, $100,000 mistake to be exact, where a tenant sued a landlord for mold. It's all about mold. I ask that if you have a colleague, you have a friend, a loved one who's a landlord or a tenant, go ahead and tag them in this discussion, share this conversation because it costs nothing but your time to show up and get this information. Is that all right? So again, welcome today. For those of you who are tenants, welcome today. For those of you who are landlords, welcome today. For those of you who are just bored and have nothing to do, just want to tune in to hear what I'm talking about today. So get ready for this discussion because I'm gonna dive deep into it. And I want to just open up by just sharing what mold is. I don't want to assume that all of my viewers are knowledgeable about this matter. So let me just pull up what mold is. Okay. So this is the definition of mold. mold can find its way in rental properties. And so, since I am talking about rental properties, I'm going to focus on that. But mold can show up anywhere, right? But for the sake of this discussion, mold find its way in rental property. It could be through an open door, through windows, through vents, through the heating and ventilations, the air conditioning system. It can find its way in a home, like if there's been a flood or something of that sort. And so essentially, mold will find its way whenever there's some sort of moisture somewhere. So sometimes it could be a pipe break, it could be a sometimes it could be a little pinhole in the pipe, right? And let me pull this down for a second. And so with the pinhole, usually that's a common problem, right? So a pinhole in a pipe, maybe behind the wall, the landlord may not be knowledgeable or aware that there's a leak behind the wall, and usually that's one of the areas where I've seen a lot of mold issues showing up at. Oh, just by way of announcement, I have been in the industry for many, many years. I am not a mold inspector. I'm not a mold expert, but I'm just going to share this information. I am a housing inspector. And so it could be a pipe break. It could be a leaky toilet that's been dripping for so long. And maybe, let's take, for instance, an apartment building where a toilet has been leaking. The landlord couldn't really fix the problem because maybe they didn't know that the problem existed. Sometimes tenants don't know to have conversations and share concerns, or maybe to report that they hear the toilet running, right? And so sometimes the toilet can leak underneath the floor. The tenant may not see anything, but maybe the unit below or the basement. Um, or the floorboards beneath, or the basement area, if you will, because sometimes taking that water, and it may not be visible at first glance, and maybe there's just something going on happening behind the wall. Lots of things happen. It could be, like I shared, the heating in the air conditioning unit where there is moisture, right? And so mold can grow anywhere. I do want landlords and tenants to take this subject matter extremely serious today, because it could cost a lot of money if the problem is ignored. All right. So today I'm not talking about just a theoretical type of matter, right? What I'm sharing today is real life, real world experience and case studies and things that have happened. Because ultimately, I'm hoping to prevent some of you from going down this rabbit hole, right? But if you take this information and you do nothing with it, and you still just allow problems to fester, then I've done my part. So you can't say that you didn't know if you are a landlord who don't take repairs seriously. So let me get into the matter. So the conversation today, this $100,000 costly mistake, it happened in Oregon. A tenant actually sued the property management company because, here's the thing, they reported the issue to the property manager. So the property manager was aware. The tenant was able to document that they contacted the landlord, they reported it, and not only did they report it over the phone, but they follow up with an email, because maybe they tune into me and they listen to what I say. I say, make sure that you follow up in writing. That's applicable for landlords. It's also applicable for tenants. And so this tenant had a paper trail where they reported to the landlord that there was a water issue, that there were black spots in the property, and they assumed that it might have been mold. Now, I'm going to pause because I'm also a housing provider. Okay. Haven't been in the industry for almost 30 years. I'm also a property management educator. I take matters like this seriously. Okay. So if I was managing that property, the first thing that I would have done was had a team to go out. First of all, I would have gone out with the team to assess whatever the issues were or are, right? So that I would be aware of whatever the next steps must be. Okay. So I think maybe sometimes I have been over the top with making sure that I understood what needed to happen. But at the end of the day, owners, landlords, property managers, you are the gatekeeper. You are responsible for protecting the asset. That's the property. That's also your backside, right? You want to protect the asset, protect you at all costs, right? But then you also want to make sure that you are responsible for providing rental property that's decent, safe, and sanitary. Why? Because it is a requirement. Okay. And so, for whatever reason, the landlord didn't go out, didn't take it seriously, and the tenant took this landlord to court. And this landlord had to pay $100,000 because the tenant reported that there was a water leak and there was a strong, musky type of odor in the rental property. And they did absolutely nothing. I can't imagine doing absolutely nothing when I know that there's a problem. But this is not about me. So, anyway, went to court. The jury returned a verdict that this owner had to pay $103,000 plus attorney fees. Okay, that's just in Oregon. Okay, all right. So there was another case study in the state of Delaware. A lawsuit was filed. A jury awarded two women $1 million. I'm going to pause. I'm going to let that sink in for a few seconds, if you will. The jury awarded two tenants who sued their landlord for mold. So I'm not sure if they each received 500,000 or whatever, but $1 million payout is what that landlord had to pay those tenants. We're talking about mold. So here's the thing. Sometimes if landlords, property managers, owners, contractors would just go a little bit further than taking a look at it and saying, oh, well, that's dirt. I've experienced that. I have had, for whatever reason, I've had property managers where I did a walkthrough of their properties with them. I pointed out that there were some black spots on the wall, right? And they said, oh, well, Karissa, that's just dirt. I don't know, because I'm not a mold inspector, but I just encourage that they take it seriously and get a mold inspector out. Listen, there's nothing wrong with spending $225 or whatever the cost is to get a mold inspection, right? You got to pay for the mold inspector to come out. You got to pay so let me just slow down a little bit. So usually when a mold inspector come out, they'll take spores, they'll take samples of the environment where there could be potentially mold, right? So they'll take the spores, they'll put it in a little container, they'll send it to the lab and have it tested. That's usually about $175 to $225. It just depends on how many samples are being tested. I've gone through this enough in the DC metropolitan area. I kind of have an understanding of the process. Now, just depending on the property and the rules and the policy, it could be different. But at the very least, pay for the mold inspector, pay for them to come out, get the samples, pay for the test, and bring it back. And have this landlord or these landlords treated their business like a business, which is what I always say. If you treat your business like a business, it's going to pay you like a business. But if you treat it like a hobby, guess what? It's going to pay you like a hobby. So if they would have spent that, not even $500 to have the place tested, it would have saved them over $100,000. Or in this second case, where this landlord had to pay $1 million. Like, I can't make this stuff up. This is public information. Do the research, find out for yourself that what I'm saying is emphatically true. Okay. I share real case studies because, again, I'm hoping to help some of you avoid going down that rabbit hole. Now, I'm going to give some tips for landlords and I'm going to give some tips for tenants today. So let me just apologize for not sharing that, because I want you all to understand the seriousness of this matter, but also how you can protect yourself as a landlord or a tenant. Okay, so now let me go West Coast. There was a tenant who settled with their landlord in the state of California, and that payout was $500,000, where the landlord failed to maintain the crawl space, resulting in moisture and toxic mold throughout that rental property. All right. And so what could have saved them was a mold test under $500. And so here, this landlord in California had to pay over $500,000 as a payout. Listen, please take these matters seriously, because they really are. Okay. So I'm going to give some tips for landlords today. All right. And again, if you have questions, if you have comments, remarks, or observations, please put it in the comment section so that I can address it. But if not, I'm going to keep going. So here's my first tip for landlords. Okay. If you're a landlord, if you're a housing provider, whether you're the owner, you manage the property, or whatever, here's some tips for you. You want to definitely do mold inspections. All right. So if a tenant reports that there is black spots, let me just start there. Maybe they don't smell it yet. Maybe they just see little black spots on the wall, on the baseboard, on the door, on the vent, wherever. If a tenant reports that they see black spots, please have it tested. Doesn't cost a lot of money to have it tested. All right. Here's my second tip. Landlords, you want to do it swiftly. Don't take your time. Don't take weeks. Don't take months, because you never know how, if it is mold, if it could negatively impact that tenant's health. Sometimes people don't realize how quickly a respiratory infection can happen. It could negatively impact not just that tenant, but let's say they have kids in a rental property. You don't know the long-term impact of people being exposed to mold. So please respond swiftly, get somebody out there, acknowledge that concern, not just in person, not just over the phone, but also in writing, because you want to be able to document and be able to say that you responded to the tenant. You let the tenant know you're going to send somebody out to identify whatever the issue is. Okay. And just because a tenant say that it is mold, unless it has been tested and confirmed, you don't want to confirm that it's mold. You don't know, right? And a tenant don't know. Who knows, right? We don't know. I'm not a mold inspector. I'm a housing inspector. But if I go into a rental property and I see black spots, I can't either way assume or not assume that it's mold. I can refer the matter to a professional because that's not my lane. And I've learned to stay in my lane in my young age. All right. And here's a third tip for landlords. Please make sure that you keep an open line of communication with your tenants. All right. I know some landlords are not open minded, they are not open to have hard conversations with tenants about issues and problems. But please understand the importance of, like I say this so often, that if you treat your business like a business, it will, in fact, pay you like a business. But if you treat it like a hobby and you don't care, you don't keep an open line of communication, well, it's going to pay you like a hobby. Or maybe you'll have to pay because you've treated it like a hobby. All right. So those are the three tips I want to share for landlords. Hey, Juan, thank you so much for tuning in. You have a question. Are the landlords responsible for the tenants' dock the bills when it's established as mold and a tenant get sick? That's a great question, Juan. In many cases, yes. And also, in many cases, not only do landlords have to pay the medical expenses, but they also have to pay attorney fees. And so that's why the cost can get up there. And Juan, I'm not sure if you heard me when I shared that one landlord had to pay $1 million for a mold issue. And so, yeah, great question. Thank you for that. All right. So now I want to turn my attention and focus for a few minutes on tenants, because I want to share information across the board. I want to make sure that on both sides of the aisle that there's clear information, that you know what your roles and your responsibilities as well as your rights are. So for tenants, the first thing is please make sure that you are maintaining proper ventilation. So that means when you're taking a shower, there should be a vent in the bathroom, or it should be a window. Now, in some properties, I realize that's not always the case. I understand that sometimes people have created bathrooms or had bathroom put in and they didn't have a proper ventilation system, or maybe yours does not work. Let me go back to landlords. Landlords, please make sure that the bathroom is properly ventilated, because that's a requirement, number one. But tenants, if you're, for instance, if you're taking a shower, if you're taking a bath, turn that exhaust fan on. That's going to pull some of that moisture out of that room. Because if not, sometimes mold can grow. Another thing that could help is after you take a hot, steamy shower, and maybe if the ventilation is poor, just kind of leave the shower curtain open, let it dry versus closing that curtain because moisture will stay behind that shower curtain. And I know that it may not seem like it's a big deal, but it could really be a big deal. Um, and so I want you to understand the role that you play, right? And so sometimes it could be mold, sometimes it could be dirt, but if you have a habit of taking a shower or a hot bath and turn on that you don't turn on the exhaust fan, the exhaust vent, I'm sorry, if you don't open the window, then that moisture cannot escape. It just kind of stays right there. All right. And here's a second tip for tenants. If you see something, say something. I say that often. So if you're a tenant and you know that there's a problem going on, go ahead and report that to your landlord. Because here's why that's important. If your landlord is anybody like me, let me come back on screen. If your landlord has listened to me, if your landlord is seasoned and knowledgeable, they should have a lease that says that you are responsible for reporting issues within 5 days. And if you fail to report issues, then you will be responsible versus the landlord. So now, tenants, I am not saying that you can always sue your landlord if in fact you're responsible for doing something and you haven't done it. And so that's why I'm sharing this information, because I want you to know the role that you play if in fact it's in your lease. Because if it's in your lease, you sign on a dotted line to say that you do, then you do abide by and adhere to all of the terms of that rental lease agreement, whether you read the lease in its entirety or not, whether you understood what you were signing when you signed on that dotted line. That rental lease signed by both parties now become a legally binding document, meaning that if you take the landlord to court, the landlord can present the lease to the judge and say, well, hey, Your Honor, my tenant signed this lease saying that they will report it to me within 5 days. And the tenant never reported it to me, so we were not aware. Now, the landlord will still be responsible for taking care of the repairs, but you may not be able to sue the landlord, or the landlord could potentially be able to pass along whatever the cost is to you. So I don't want you to end up putting yourself in a trick bag. So you want to make sure that you're reporting problems timely and promptly. And when it comes to preventive measures, take steps to prevent mold. So I gave a tip on making sure the exhaust fan, the vent is running. Make sure the window is open if you have one. Make sure that when you come out of the shower, maybe just leave that shower curtain open to kind of get some of that that hot, steamy moisture from out of that immediate area. Also, a dehumidifier in damp areas. So I've been talking a lot about bathrooms, but sometimes mold can grow in the basement. All right, so let me come back on screen. So many years ago, I was managing a property, and the tenant who who was occupying that space, for whatever reason, unplugged the device in the basement, which would pull out the moisture. Okay. And she said that it was making her electric bill high. Well, it may have gone up $1 or $2 a month, but it wasn't anything like through the roof or anything like that. So, and I kept trying to explain to the tenant the importance of keeping the device running. And so, turns out I moved on and was no longer managing the property anymore. And so the owner contacted me like years later to say that the tenant was still refusing to keep the device plugged up. And as a result, mold not only grew in that immediate area, but it spread throughout the basement. And it cost that owner thousands of dollars to fix the problem. And so, unfortunately for that owner, they did not have any protection in the lease. Their asset was not covered. And so, it was a really bad situation. It was a bad situation for the tenant because The tenant's daughter ended up getting sick. The owner had to pay an extensive renovation bill. But fortunately for that owner, the tenant ended up moving out of the property. The owner ended up selling the property as is. And so a new investor came in and was responsible for the headache and the cost of getting that home into whatever shape that they wanted it in order to rent it or flip it. And so I share this information because sharing is caring. I want you all to know how serious small matters could be, right? So I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to go left for a minute. For those of you who have ever been on a boat, Juan, I know that you're familiar with yachts. I know that you have a boat. And so on a boat, there is a trim tab. A trim tab is a small thing. It's a small part. It's a small tool on the boat that steers the direction of that boat. It's just so small, right? And so in this rental property space, I want you to think of issues as a trim tab. If you take care of the problem when it's small, it can guide, it can direct your business and your business practice. And so if you treat it like a business, you take care of the issues up front when they're very small, it'll steer you in the right course. But if you don't, if you ignore the small problem and you just let that ship, that boat go whichever direction it want to go, then you don't maintain control of your rental property business. And so again, please take these matters seriously because they are. If not, it could cost you thousands, if not millions of dollars. I shared 3 case studies today in Oregon and Delaware and California. And, these are not restricted to just these states. Mold happens everywhere. And it's not just in rental properties. Mold can show up anywhere in the kitchen, in the bathroom, anywhere that there's water or moisture. Mold can show up. And so I hope that I was able to share something that was helpful today. I gave the definition of what mold is. Please make sure that if this is valuable, that you share this information with somebody else. And again, it costs nothing but your time to show up each and every Monday at 7:30 p.m. to get this information. I'm live on Facebook. I'm live on LinkedIn. I'm live on YouTube. And when I'm not online, you can always email me. I can be found, I promise you. As long as I have breath in my body, I'm going to give you information. All right, so Juan, you said, is it true if you have mold in the residence, you should discard all your clothing and furniture as a precaution? That's a great question. Some people do, Juan, and I would recommend that if the case is severe. Great question, and here's why that's important. Because with mold spores, you can't see mold spores. It's just floating through the air. Like you can't see air, right? You can't see mold. Well, it just depends on if you're a mold inspector and you have a special type of device. But for the natural eye, like you and I, can't see mold spores, right? And so if there is mold floating around, it's going to land wherever. So let's say, for instance, you have mold in the heating and air conditioning unit. And let's say mold spores are blowing out of that device, right? And so if it's blowing out, it's going to land wherever. You can't see it. And so, yeah, I would recommend that if it's a bad situation that, those items be replaced because you can't see it and you don't know how bad it could be, right? So let's say, for instance, as a landlord or owner, you go in, you take care of the problem, what you can see, which are on the walls, and you have someone to treat it, and they put the kills on it and they paint over it. You can never see it, right? But they only treat that wall. But who's to say that the mold spores are not settled in the carpet or the tenant's furniture or the curtains, right? And so sometimes you don't really think about those things, which is why we have these conversations, because I want you all to know. I don't want to have to do a Facebook Live and have to talk about you because you've gone through these type of situations. So I prefer to talk about other people in other parts of the country. But that's a great question. Thank you for that, Juan. All right. You said, hey, Damon Jones, I sent the message about mold on January 24th in 2023, and my landlord did nothing about the mold. There was no mold visible, but the leak was under the floor and in the wall of the closet. All right. Thank you for tuning in today. You also said you've contacted DOB, which is Department of Buildings in Washington, D.C., for those who don't know, and they did nothing. You contacted DOEE, which is Department of Energy and Environment. They did nothing, which is also in DC. You got a mode test and it came back positive. You shared it with your landlord and asked for a remediation plan. Wow. And you said they have not responded for 10 days. They have different mode inspectors that come that different mode inspector come 4 days ago, and the inspector told me that I can't have access to the report. Can I get a copy of the inspection test? Great question. So here's the thing. If your landlord paid for that test, I would say reach out to the landlord. But now here's the thing. Sometimes people will not allow you to have a copy of the report because they don't want you to see what's in the report. So if you're not responsible for paying for it, then yes, that inspector could tell you that you can't have access to it because you didn't pay for it. And so if someone else paid for it, I would say please reach out to that individual to see if they will provide you with a copy of it. Hopefully they will. If not, you could always have the property tested yourself. And if in fact there are any issues, you can have the landlord, of course, going through the legal process, going before a judge, have the landlord to reimburse you for the cost of that mode test. But great question. Thank you for that. Hey, Jamie, thank you so much for tuning in. Can landlords do an addendum to add that 5-day notification if it's an HCV, Housing Choice Voucher tenant? Housing, I should know this. Housing Choice Voucher Program participant had a brain freeze. I should know that. Yes, you can definitely do an addendum. I would suggest to have a conversation with the tenant. Let the housing authority know that you're doing an addendum with no change to the contract rent, of course. And definitely add that because you want to protect you as much as possible. Because if not, then you could potentially end up in a hot seat. So yeah, definitely inquire, Jamie. Great question. Go ahead and inquire about adding that addendum. I would strongly recommend you do that like yesteryear or when that tenant first signed the lease. Great question. All right. Here's another question. How can you check the air quality in your home? Some say they are sick because of mold, but how can we be sure? That's a great question. I would say to have a mold inspector to come out because they will test the air quality on levels that is. Oh, so here's the thing. Sometimes, just depending on whatever is going on in the home, it could be mold, it could be anything else, right? It could be allergies, it could be dirt, it could be dust. We don't know. But if you think that it's mold, have a mold inspector come out and test it. Now, if the air quality is bad, I would suggest to change the filters often, the HVAC filters. So for instance, in rental property where, let's say for instance, tenants smoke weed or whatever they smoke, sometimes and often, and in many cases, tenants don't realize how the smoke negatively impacts the home, and it does negatively impact the air quality. So if you think it's mold, have it tested for mold. If not, then that's a good thing because you definitely don't want it to be mold. But anything else, change the filters. Listen, I had a rental property where the tenant smoked, and she smoked marijuana, and she smoked because it was prescribed. It was for medical purposes. And the neighbor, was a house, it wasn't an apartment, it was a house. And the neighbor was extremely upset because the smoke, of course, smoke travels, and the neighbor complained that it was making them sick, it was making their child sick. And so, there are a lot of things that could definitely impact the air quality in a home. But if it's mold, you want to definitely have it tested to be on the safe side. All right, Juan, you said, thank you for this informative broadcast. You firmly believe that mold is nothing to play with. Absolutely. Absolutely. Jamie, Listen, I'm okay with off-topic questions. That's what I'm here for. If I have an answer, I'm gonna give it to you. That's why I like to do this live. I could pre-record it, but if I pre-record it, I can't answer your question. So ask any questions that you have. Um, yep. So thank you for confirming. All right. So last question here. I did have the test done and has already come back positive. What should I do to get them to remediate that? I would suggest that you reach out to an attorney. If Department of Building didn't do anything, if so, here's the thing. In DC, well, let me not say just DC because there are really no strong federal laws to govern mold and how it should be treated. I mean, there's like basic information, basic regulations, if you will, but for the most part, there is no strong um, regulated um, requirement for how landlords should treat the matter. And so you mentioned that DOB did nothing. Department of Energy and Environment didn't do anything. And so I do know that in DC, that's a problem. And so Department of Building, which was formerly called DCRA, the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs, their name has been changed. Um, they'll come out, they'll take a look at it, but because they are not mode inspectors, they'll refer that to department to DOEE, right? And DOEE would say, well, because it's not is not it has to be within a certain range, right? And if it's not that large, then they don't really give guidance on it. They just leave it up to the landlord. But unfortunately, because a lot of things have fallen through the cracks and because of the loopholes, sometimes things have gone incomplete or not reported. So if you feel like you've been going around a circle and not getting results, I would say reach out to an attorney in DC, a landlord and tenant attorney who would take this case and just take it before court. Make sure you have your evidence. If you have any health issues, um, definitely keep your receipt for anything that you have to pay out of pocket, because if it comes back that your health is negatively impacted, then unfortunately the landlord should be held accountable for whatever the financial cost is to repair the problem, for your health issues, for taking the matter to court, as well as having to replace items in the rental property. So carpet, curtains, furniture, sofas, like just think about air travels, right? And so mold spores, if it's blowing out the vent, it could travel. And so I shared cases today where landlords had to pay 100,000, 500,000, and $1 million for damages because of mold. So please, yeah, take these matters seriously. You said you already have a lawyer sending them correspondence. That's the best thing that you can do. And in the interim of time, I would suggest and recommend that as long as you're in that rental property, keep a mask on. I was I was in a situation where I didn't know that there were mold spores blowing out, and I just knew that every time I went in, whenever the air conditioning or the heating unit was turned on, I would begin to cough, and I didn't realize what was going on. And so it turned out that it was even in that situation, it was mold. And so thank you for your questions and thank you for bringing that to my attention. And Lily, I know that you may already have my email address, but if I'm ever not online, if you have questions, please email me. That is my email address, carissaspann@gmail.com. carissaspann@gmail.com. So today I shared case studies, uh, landlords in Oregon, landlord in Delaware, landlord in California. They had to pay out of pocket to their tenants a lot of money because they didn't take mold seriously when the tenants reported it. And so I shared tips for landlords. I shared 3 tips for landlords. I talked about how important it is to have a mold inspection conducted. I talked about how quickly they should respond, because you definitely don't want to delay responding to tenants' complaints about potential mold. And you also, as a landlord, want to maintain an open line of communication. I shared 3 tips for tenants, and that is to make sure that the bathroom especially is properly ventilated by making sure that exhaust fan is on, and or opening up a window if there's one in that rental property. I also told tenants to report those issues timely and to also do what they can to minimize any potential moisture that's lingering in the rental property. So I do hope that something that I shared today was of value. This is what I do each and every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm live on Facebook, I'm live on LinkedIn, and I'm live on YouTube. I'm Karissa Spann, the landlord and tenant coach. If there are any other questions, please put it in the comment section. And I want to address any questions, whether on topic, off topic, while I have a few more minutes. And if not, I won't hold you. So if this has been helpful, please make sure that you like, tag, and share it with others. And again, thank you so much for joining me today. I value your time. I know that you could have been doing something other than what you are doing. So thank you for tuning in. And again, I'm live every Monday. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to say it one more time for the people that's sitting in the back or just tuned in. I'm live every Monday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every week I come and I share a different topic to help landlords, to help tenants, and to help the entire rental community. And if you're not a landlord, then maybe you can still use this information because some of it is applicable. You don't have to be a landlord. You don't have to be a tenant to have an issue with mold. So take this information, take the advice that I'm giving you because it's free. Free 99. It costs you absolutely nothing but your time to show up and to get this information. All right. I appreciate you. Okay. Hello. Thank you so much. Oasis Realty. The tenant has a responsibility to mitigate any further damage. Absolutely. I know that you know this. Thank you so much for tuning in. And so I shared this information because I recognize how valuable this is. Oasis Realty, I should have had you come on to give some tips. I should have had you to come live on screen with me. You said at some point they must stay away from the mold or leave the premises. And that's a good point. That's a good point. So Oasis Realty is a knowledgeable subject matter on this. And so I do value this feedback as well. All right. So if there are no additional questions, comments, remarks, or observations, I'm going to go ahead and end this segment for today. And again, thank you so much. Please make sure that you tune in next Monday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My time is up. I thank you for yours. And again, if you have questions, if you have comments, if I'm not online, email me. My email address is carissaspann@gmail.com. I'm live on Facebook. I'm live on YouTube. I'm live on LinkedIn. And by all means, if you have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, go on over to that YouTube channel, smash that subscribe button so that you'll be the first to know when I am live and online. All right. So again, ladies and gentlemen, my time is up. I thank you for yours. I'll see you all next Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.